I've seen so many companies that are draconian with safety, where they have policies, made you work with, you're going to get terminated. Okay, fine, but the business is set up so that you back to the legal aspect. I had a policy. I trained the person. It's their responsibility. The business, although that person works here, will limit its liability when it can show all this training it's doing. And it's like, okay, but is that really what you're supposed to do? No, teach and train the people to look for issues, look for defects, look for unsafe activities, have them bring it to the attention of the business and solve it collaboratively.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to I'm the Gaffer podcast. I've got a fantastic guest today. His name is John Mullen, and John is a Fortune 20 trained executive, has extensive experience in the mergers and acquisition pipeline, acquisitions, integration operations, manufacturing, distribution, commercial safety, and business development for iconic brands in the building products, office supply, and B2C, B2B services industry. John, welcome to the podcast. I'm delighted to have you. I know we had a couple of back and forwards already trying to get you online, but obviously we got there eventually. So welcome to the podcast.
Listen, it's a pleasure to be on. Appreciate the invitation. And it's great to speak on a subject that I think is extremely important for business and people in business.
Yeah, like your profile is such a high profile in terms of your background that one of the major things that intrigued me about you was that you probably took a step away from the sort of CEO type profile and went into safety. And that's a massive difference to normal people's role or career path. And that really intrigued me because a lot of CEOs want to stay on as a CEO or go in as, advisors or as non-exec directors. But you kind of said, no, I like the safety thing. So where did that, talk to us about that? Where did that come about?
Yeah, actually, you have that captured pretty accurately. And unfortunately, I think for many that are not in the safety realm, something happens catastrophically in a business. And, there's a challenge, to either raise to the challenge or not. In this case, I work for a company. It's a wonderful company, but there was a catastrophic injury where a little girl got killed. And there was a call to action. And that call to action was, it can't happen again. It shouldn't have happened. But how do you then work operationally through the organization to put, weave safety into the fabric and the culture of the company? And that was a call to action. The founder asked me to become the inaugural safety person in the organization. And I'm not sure I did it with open arms because I had never done safety. It was scary, to be honest with you. It was probably the scariest job I've ever had in my whole career. But I'm glad I did it. And the company, is thriving today because of the changes it went through.
What was your position in the company at that time?
I was actually the VP of operations for an international company. So I had international. But again, as this event occurred, this catastrophic event occurred, we didn't have a safety organization. We had a loss prevention organization. And the time was right to say we need to really focus not just on loss prevention, but on safety, safe behaviors, hiring people, training people, making sure that, again, we had an open business. So when customers walk through, it makes it doubly difficult. You're not just talking about a manufacturing floor where you're trying to make sure that you're safe for your workers. Now you have people coming into the environment, and you have to make sure that in that environment, those folks are safe. I mean, that's the minimum basic requirement.
Yeah, I think you really hit on a subject that probably maybe was by default, but your background, if you don't mind me saying so, and you can correct me on this, but you seem to have a very thorough process mindset. And you just probably looked at this and said, well, this is another process that just went wrong.
Actually, that's not true. I'm kind of a blue collar executive. I started in stores. I started, running retail stores. I was elevated through running districts in multiple units. when I became the VP of operations, I was trying to figure out how to think differently. I was trying to figure out how to think right to left. I was trying to think of solutions.
Yeah.
The safety position demanded a different way of thinking. It demanded solving root cause. It demanded doing analytics. So it really challenged me, and it actually helped me become the leader I am today, and moved me from more of a tactical thinker to a strategic thinker, trying to solve problems in an organization at a systemic level.
Yeah. How can you manage scale and be safe?
Yeah, it's somebody asked me a question about, how do you manage 1,000 stores? It's the same way. You don't manage 1,000 stores. You
Yeah.
set up systems, processes, KPIs, rewards. So everything is aligned, in the
Yeah.
business. If you don't incentivize your team, if you don't motivate them, if you don't find them doing safe things and reward them, it's all behavioral based. And then it's almost like flying an airplane. If
Yeah.
anybody flies an airplane, which I've had the pleasure of doing, and all of a sudden clouds come in, you can't see, you have to fly on instruments. So
Yeah.
business is the same way. So it's got all these instruments if you set them up right, and you have to really view those instruments to kind of get in front of the next issue. What are some of the leading things that are happening in the business? What are the incidents that are occurring in the business that if you don't address those issues, they become an accident, and accidents become fatalities. So
Yeah.
that, again, it really started me down a whole different line of thinking, but it was something that was, I'll say it again, it was the scariest thing I've ever done.
The thing about safety is, and I think that most people listening to this podcast will identify with, is that there's so many different facets to something that could go wrong, and something that might seem small to the business owner might be the one that actually comes up and bites them. So what's your experience in terms of not, putting bullets all over the place? Where's the silver bullet?
Well, if you take over an existing business, there's data to analyze.
Okay.
So you're looking at, if you collect incidents, which many companies don't, they only collect accidents. But if you're collecting incidents, then you're doing a root cause analysis to say what's really happening here. If you do good investigation on accidents, and you solve at root cause, now you're preventing a potential further accident. But it's really, for me, it was understanding what was happening in the business, what was the risk. So there was certain categories that were creating the biggest risk. And so you either deal with those first, they don't become catastrophic, and then you kind of get more into the root cause. But what I found a lot was when you have people engaged in work, safe work, it's really making sure that the behaviors are correct and making sure that those folks are being rewarded when they do things right. I think too many times companies are punitive, people are punitive. It's so easy to fire somebody when they do something wrong.
Yeah.
I'll also say that I find that leadership abdicates responsibility and says, well, I set up the rules, you didn't follow them. No, I don't believe in that. I believe that leadership always has a fiduciary responsibility to understand what it's asking its people to do, and then understand that threat assessment is not the individuals to do, but the companies to do. And if you're asking someone to do something that potentially is unsafe, that's your fault as a leader. And you have to make sure you're putting your people in a position not just to train them, not just to pay them, but to make sure you're not asking them to do things heroically to take care of a customer that actually may create an incident or an accident.
Yeah. No, I love that. And from previous discussions with me, I'm very passionate in this area, obviously, and I do have my own sort of philosophy that health and safety should be seen as a profit center and not just a compliance center.
Yeah,
I
we
think,
talked about this before.
yeah,
I think a lot of companies handle safety as a cost of business.
yeah,
I don't agree with that. So if every year you're saying the business is going to go up 10%, I'm going to allow another 2% for accidents on a financial basis, that's absolutely the wrong way to do it. You can't, exactly. What you're allowing is you're accepting the basic tenets of what's occurring in the business to grow. Right.
Yeah.
And by the way, I would say that if you really think about behavioral issues, it's also, you'll find that you have poor customer service, you have high turnover, you have bad morale. It is all, indicative of how are you treating your team, how do they think about themselves. But again, if you treat safety like it's just a cost center, I guarantee you, all you're going to get is more accidents. You may like the percentage, but at the end of the day, you may not like that you've hurt somebody, or again, catastrophically hurt somebody.
People that have challenged me say to me, "Well, how can you say it's a profit center?" Or like, give me examples. And one of the clear examples I give them, there's multiple answers to that question, by the way, that I can give. But one of the ones that kind of sticks out, is very obvious, is if you employ competent people and you pay competent people good money, you'll attract good people to your business that will act at a higher level for your business, which gives you a better outcome. Now, like, that sounds so basic and so simple, but like, think about that.
But listen, in the last 4 years since COVID, I've heard culture used by many organizations.
Yeah.
It's culture. It's culture. Well, what better culture can you have to making sure that people come to work and feel safe?
Yeah.
And again, you have to have a leadership position here. You can't defer it. You can't just say, well, that's safety's job. The one thing I was really, I will use a name brand. When I was in my position, I ended up consulting with DuPont Consulting Company, and I learned a lot. And by the way, I asked them, I said, how did you get started with safety? Because they're probably the most renowned United States organization for safety. They have their own business and they have a consulting arm. And they quite simply just looked at me and said, well, our business started making TNT and people died.
Wow.
So the genesis for a lot of these issues was, how did you become safe? Well, we had this tragic accident, so it wasn't okay for us. So, using them, they also taught me that if you have safety experts in the field, they're not responsible for safety. The operator is.
Yeah.
The safety person is there coaching, teaching, making sure the training is done, making sure that they're helping you look at root cause, helping you dive through the data, helping you analyze the business. Again, it's not an auditor. It's someone who's actually involved. And that's why DuPont always used their former CEOs as safety consultants. Who better to help with safety go to another plant than say, okay, this person's already run a plant for 20 years. I respect that individual. I'm going to listen to what they have to say. Yeah. They're not a safety person. They're a business person.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I've definitely come across CEOs, and the conversations I've had with them on safety have been just mind blowing, as opposed to somebody that's has a safety background or safety education. They don't get maybe the whole picture of the commercial reality of, safety is needed and it's a bolt on, but it's an integration into the overall business, and it's an input output.
I remember the initial conversations I had when I became the lead safety person, officer in the company, and it was, what are you going to do about it? I was like, I'm not going to do anything about it. You're going to do something about it. The organization is here to bring an expertise. The organization we're building are not auditors. They're coaches. They're teachers. Yeah. But you're responsible for your division. If you have an accident in your store, in your business, it's your responsibility. It's your team's responsibility. Once we accept that mindset, now we can start to defeat the issue at its root cause. But I also find, to your point, that a lot of folks, it's a line item on the P&L. Yeah. They look at the safety person and say, what are you going to do to get these accidents down? Yeah. And if you're operating a business like that, you're not going to be successful, because the people operating the business, the leaders of the P&L, have to be the ones that are responsible for safety in the business.
Yeah, but I'm listening to you and I'm thinking to myself, the safety professionals, and I'm part of that industry, have complicated safety and put layers upon layers upon layers on top of safety, and they've been encouraged and probably promoted by the insurance industry and the legal industry to, the more paperwork you have, the better for everybody. When the poo poo hits the fan, you can't have enough paperwork. And I think we've probably, or the safety industry has probably created a demon of its own by having too much paperwork thrown into the system, which is kind of dragging down the ability to scale the business, because you're getting pulled back to do all of this paperwork for what? It's an unintended, uncalculated event that you can't really measure.
Well, the world is litigious.
Yeah.
Depending on what country you do trade in, some countries are more in the United States, some states are more litigious than others. But I would offer to you is this. If you start to teach that if it's raining outside, do you close your doors? No. Can you mop the floor and make sure the floors are dry all the time? No. But can you make consumers aware that there's an issue? Yes. So the paperwork helps to, fend off lawsuits and, show that we did right. But the reality is it's the behavior of the people that are in the business. And again, raining outside, you put up a wet cone sign that says, hey, the floor may be slippery. That doesn't abdicate you from 100% of the liability. But forget about the legal side of it. You're telling a customer who walks through the door, hey, you're coming in here, we're doing the best we can, but there's potentially an issue of slip and fall. So, yeah, I think that sometimes, people get concerned a little bit, and I understand the financial end of it, making sure you do all the paperwork, making sure that you're doing all of your, your OSHA training. And I mean, that's all important. But I would say that the focus for me on safety has to be, again, the behavior of the people in the business. And if they're doing the right thing, then the first thing that's going to happen is the incidents are going to go down.
So walk me through a day one gap analysis in your mindset. If I brought you into a business today, it doesn't matter whether it's construction or any other business, what are you looking for in John Mullen's playbook?
Well, the first thing I do is look at the data. I mean, I actually look at the P&L. The P&L actually tells you a lot, and I'm not looking at the safety lines.
Wow. Go.
I'm actually looking at the EBITDA line, which is the cash flow line. Why? Because that tells you how much pressure the business is under.
Yeah.
So people respond and react to the most seminal things, which is fight or flight. I own a business. I can't make payroll. I don't have a revolving line. I'm going to start cutting corners. Yeah. So by analyzing the data, you start to get an impression of how the business is performing. But then you also can get a little bit of what is the business leader, whoever owns that P&L, what are they experiencing at the time? I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Because I've owned P&Ls. Some were really good and some were really bad. And, you're responsible for that P&L. So if you start to understand that profit and loss statement from the viewpoint of the person that owns it, it helps me understand the pressure they may or may not be facing. Then the second thing is speaking with the people in the business about the business, not about safety. Tell me about what you do. Tell me about why you do it. Tell me why you're in business. And again, I'm looking for why you do what you do. Because if you understand why people do what they do, and then the P&L is the output of what you do, now you can look at all the tactical things that have to occur for the output.
Yeah.
And you understand that there's a sequence of events that are occurring in the business to drive profit activities. Some of these activities may be skipped over, may be collapsed, not from a lean perspective, but from a cost perspective.
Yeah.
And you start to say, okay, let's go back now, and let's say that any process, we're going to make widgets. Let's look at the process, the end state. What's the widget look like? What's the quality? And then go back upstream through the process and start to say, okay, where are the edits coming from? Where are the defects coming from?
Yeah.
The defects help you understand if there's not just unsafe practices in place, but if people are doing things, for the wrong reason. Is it a training issue? Is it we're cutting cost issue? So I try to visit the business and view it through the lens of the people owning the business, and then always look at it from the customer perspective.
I love that. I'm just thinking about the CEO saying to you, John, I brought you in here for safety. What are you doing with our finance guy talking about the P&L.
Well, look,
see that conversation.
But again, if you walk in and just talk about safety and have no context, and the business is insolvent,
it's risk management.
You have to help them become solvent.
Yeah.
So any good business consultant, any good leader says, okay, the business is not a nonprofit. There are nonprofits and there are for-profits. We're for-profit business. If they're not making money, then, and you start talking about adding more cost to the business, it's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's always about how can I help the business leader, owner, get more utility out of the business. At the same time, you're building in safe work practices into the fabric and culture of the business, right? Yeah. Saying, okay, now let's do this right. Now let's make sure that everything we do isn't just to make a widget, but to make a good widget at a low cost with low defects, and no one in the manufacturing process gets hurt. If you go into a business, whether it's an open business or a manufacturing floor, I love to walk the business and talk to the people making the product or taking care of the customers.
Yeah.
I ask questions.
Yeah. You can get a pulse from the workers. You can get an understanding of where the pressure points are within the business, talking to them. You get an understanding of their passion for the job or their motivation, and also their lack of motivation and lack of passion. And then you can kind of see, well, hold on, there's something else sinister going on here. Boeing would be a classic example where the whistleblower came out and kind of went, no, I just didn't like what's going on here. Whether, people can have their own viewpoints on where and what the issues there are, but obviously it's high profile. There's been incidents, there's been more recent incidents again. Yet, they've got a production line that's not releasing product to their customers. Their customers are screaming at them.
Right.
People probably don't calculate or don't take as much interest in losing a client. But when safety gets hit, it's usually a catastrophic event or a major failure.
One of the worst accidents in United States history was one of the shuttlecrafts.
Yeah.
There was overwhelming evidence and data that if you flew the shuttlecraft below 32 degrees, not to get technical, the O-rings were going to fail and you're going to get blow-by.
Yeah.
Warren Thiokol screamed and yelled and said, don't do this.
Yeah.
But because the folks that were running the program had deadlines to meet, they took a risk with somebody else's life. And people died. Same thing in business at a less kind of, but it's you walk in, you talk to the people on the floor. When was the last time the boss talked to you? What did they talk to you about? What do you do every day? And then as you start to get it from the customer or the employees or associates perspective, it's always good, in my opinion, look at what KPIs are you tracking? The KPIs are, we expect the business to do these things. Oh, okay. So you're telling me that these things are important to drive revenue. As you start to look at the KPIs, you may start to see some trends in the KPIs that go, well, you're only really focused on quantity, not quality. Right. So KPIs, if they're, in my experience, they're usually a blend of quantitative and qualitative output. And again, if you're only looking at quantitative things, and you really have to bring that, that notion in and say, hey, you need to really blend these KPIs so that it's qualitative and quantitative at the same time. But again, I always look at the business through the eye of the person who's responsible for the activity, because they're under pressure. They have a family to feed. And sometimes, they'll make a decision that says, I'm going to cut this cost. I'm going to make this decision, because if I don't deliver, then my job is at stake and I can't feed my family. So you have to help the person say, okay, let's go back upstream. And how do you make the right decision? But you have to also help them figure out how to be successful too. You have to have both. Or the business goes out of business. The people fail, and you just can't do that. So that's what complicates it for me is you just don't solve an issue, a safety issue, a quality issue. You have to help improve the whole output of the business at the same time.
Yeah, I love that. And just thinking about workers and, executives, leaders go on these, one-to-one coaching sessions and executive leadership programs, and the workers just generally get to do these sort of mundane, basic safety courses that are like, manual handling and
It's
they're
computerized.
they're needed. Yeah,
Well,
online training or
yeah. Well, I
whatever
mean,
it is.
online. Yeah.
But nobody
Yeah.
sits down and says, "Look, I'm
Right.
gonna coach you. I'm gonna mentor you." What do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually I want to look at you as a person,
Correct.
and I want to see your own financial landscape. Like you've a
Yeah.
driver to come to work here, so you obviously want to make money, but you also obviously want stability within your life, and I want to help you
Yeah.
grow you as a person. There's that conversation doesn't happen because
No.
somewhere along the line, someone feels that you're a worker and I'm an executive.
Yeah. I would say that one of the biggest roles for me as an executive is to be a coach and a teacher. So if I give somebody 4 things to do, tomorrow I give them 4 things to do. If I train them on the 4 things to do, and then I come in the next day and say, tell me what you learned.
Yeah.
You're teaching people not to do things. You're teaching people how to solve problems.
Yeah.
And whatever level of the business they're at, from the person taking the money to the person taking the sale to the person making the widget, it's extremely important to involve them in the business. Hey, this is where we're going as a business. This is why we're in business. This is our culture. The more you bring the people in, to me, it's a Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
And you ask me the question, whenever I make an assessment of the business, that's always, is everything red, white, or is it all checkered on each side? Because if it's checkered, the business is not in strategic alignment. Therefore, you're not getting good output. You don't have good communication. And I think that's the other assessment of a business. And as a leader, you're always trying to get the business in alignment so that every person you talk to say, what's the 4 most important things in the company? Oh, these 4 things. You know that the leadership, the people that they work with and for are pushing the message and teaching and coaching. They're not just, to your point, not just saying, do this, do that. I mean, I don't know, this is not kindergarten.
It blows my mind that you spoke about, having a chat with the workers on the shop floor, for example. And I definitely, I 100% agree with that. Like, if you brought me into a business that I knew nothing about, I'm going straight for the guys on the floor and I'm having a chat with them and asking them how you feel about the job. Would you do the job any differently than the way you're doing it today? Well, we used to do this back in the day, but then they brought in this piece of machinery and then they changed this or they changed the line or whatever else. And I'm going, why did they do that? Well, I don't know why they done that. I've been telling them for whatever, we should have done this the old way. And then you're looking at them going, you're looking at this person, you say, this guy has so much to offer and nobody's taking that information from that guy and then, educating the conveyor belt of people that's coming behind him or her and leveraging on that wealth of knowledge and experience. And they might be not up with the times or they might be kind of, but I've seen, I've first-hand experience of seeing people switching themselves off and saying, well, what's the point? I'm sick of talking to these people and they don't listen anyway. So,
I think the real magic in operating a business is involving people, learning from people, aligning people, and watching people ability every day to make decisions, to learn, to bring an assessment to you instead of you telling what to do. I think that's just a wonderful thing. It is so good to see somebody who says, hey, I want to learn and grow. And, in this business, and you take the time to teach, coach, but then you step back. To me, leadership is like you create a vacuum. A lot of times leadership compresses down. I believe you do the opposite. You create a vacuum and you allow people to start to lead up. The same thing goes for safety in the business. If you start to just audit results, if you start to just say, do these 4 things, then the business is not organic and it's not learning where it's closest to the activity. You can never, in my opinion, run a business from a control center without getting down and seeing the process. And saying, okay, this is what the data is showing, but what's really happening here? And if you teach the people in the business to solve problems, then the business starts to adapt. And that's what you're trying to do is get the business to adapt, not you be the person, telling everybody what to do. And I think that's really important. is, and I've seen so many companies that are draconian with safety, where they, have policies, major work, you're going to get terminated. Okay, fine, but the business is set up so that you're back to the legal aspect. I had a policy. I trained the person. It's their responsibility. The business, although that person works here, will limit its liability when it can show all this training it's doing. And it's like, okay, but is that really what you're supposed to do?
Yeah.
No, teach and train the people to look for issues, look for defects, look for unsafe activities.
Yeah.
Have them bring it to the attention of the business and solve it collaboratively.
Yeah, and involve people in the decision-making process. Don't
Correct.
start, dictating from the boardroom and saying, by the way, there's certain elements of the business that not everybody needs to know, and that's understandable. Yep. But if you're going to change a piece of equipment or change something, the environments that people operate within, you're changing the goalposts on the football pitch. And the striker mightn't be the striker anymore because they're not getting the football anymore, so they're not going to hit the goals.
Well, it's demoralizing too. Every time you try to set out something, you set these things. Business. I think great businesses are set up on everybody aligned, but successes. It doesn't have to be these big successes, but it's small successes, building on the successes, celebrating the wins, being positive, learning. Yeah. I mean, it's not easy. It's not easy, but I think that's every day what the organization should be trying to push through is, again, let's improve the ability of our organization to learn and adapt and to grow.
And involve people in the discussion about the financial health of the business. So, hey guys, we're down this month. Productivity was down, but we can pick it up again next month. Right. Or is there issues we need to discuss? Yeah, if you go and pay for better blades for that saw, we can get through more work.
Yeah. Well, I think to your point, explaining the why, right? So I come in and I make cuts, but I don't talk to anybody. Hey, folks, look. The macro economy is struggling. Interest rates are heavy. There's higher inflation. We have to respond, right? Our business is finding pressure points. So we need to cut costs. I've experienced and find, instead of me cutting the costs, go to the people who run the business and say, hey, we need to find $50,000 off the P&L that doesn't impact the customer experience or the employee experience. And there's so many things they come up with. And it's like, okay, now they've done it and they're executing it.
Yeah.
So to your point, if you involve the workforce, the workforce, again, learns and adapts. They buy into it, they execute, and they're also loyal to you because at least you've had respect for them to tell them what the heck's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you start having really insightful and collaborative discussions with the workforce because they're kind of buying into this whole, and it is lean. What we're talking about here is lean, by the way. It's an ironic thing to say, but we're actually talking about lean in a way because people then can say, that training you're giving us, it's not really good training. We don't really need it. I would just dump that course and maybe do the other course that we're doing, do more of that. Those gloves you're giving us, I'm going through about 4 or 5 of those pairs a week. Whereas if you give us those ones that are $25, they'll last 6 months.
Right.
So those discussions then start happening. And what's in, I tell you, as you're talking, one word is just bursting in my mind, which is momentum. That businesses struggle for momentum because they're constantly behind the curveball trying to firefight, and they're losing that sort of progressiveness. And I think, to your tune, if you can integrate safety as a valued, systematic process that automatically feeds into the culture, which feeds into the scale of the business, why would you not have this focus on safety?
Right. Yeah, look, there are different phases in business. You have startups, you have growth companies, you have mature companies. So it is clearly easier if in the startup phase you're building safety, into the fabric. That's how I think about it, of the culture of the company. But let's say you're asked to come in and look at a mature business around for 50, 75 years. It's flat. It's flat. It's just kind of going through a cycle. Sometimes it's more difficult to bring that thinking in, but the way I think about it is if you help the output of the business at the same time make it safer with quality, now everybody wins and everybody's aligned. So the owner's not looking at you as a consultant. The owner's not looking at a line item saying that's growing or that's going to be lower for me. They're understanding that the quality and quantitative output of that business is better. And more than that, the social responsibility I have as an owner is powerful. It's powerful. And I want to make sure the brand that I have and the business I have is, I hire people. I want them to come to work with, all their arms and legs and all their digits. I don't want people to go home, or customers. My God. And if I have that mindset, again, it's not spending an inordinate amount of money, because if you're just throwing money at something, you're not solving the issue. You're not.
Yeah.
It's more than that. It's an attitude. It's about how I think about my people, my customers, and how I care about them. And if you have that's really your motivation, then you'll have a safe company, but you'll also have a profitable company too.
Well said. Well said. John, if people want to get in touch with you after the podcast, is that something that you're open to, or where's the John Mullen of today? Like what is your business? And just give us a sort of a wrap up on who you are and what you do.
Listen, it's been a pleasure to be with you. I thank you for this opportunity and the platform. Years ago when I talked into safety, I never thought, I would be speaking on behalf of it, but it is an important subject. They can get through me through LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to contact me is through LinkedIn. It's John Mullen, MBA. They can find me there. And I'm actually looking for, to work with a group of people to successfully grow businesses.
Brilliant.
I enjoy working with people, solving problems, and then watching the network get better and the people get better at the same time. I can't tell you the P&Ls I've run divisions as big as $6 billion.
Wow.
I can't remember the P&L, but I can tell everybody got promoted. I can tell you the people that, are doing well, that learned. I can tell you the people. So that's what this is about. This is about you as a leader transferring knowledge that someone helped you with years ago and giving these folks an opportunity to do the things that you were afforded the opportunity to do.
Fantastic. And that's not just safety, John. You're not just talking about safety. You're open in terms of scaling businesses, and going in and finding issues and helping leaders, integrate your knowledge and your tools in order to scale these companies, or to at least put them back on the right footing.
I find that many proprietors are savants. They started a company, they had a great idea. Company gets to about $5 million. They don't know how to get it to 10. But their brilliance and their excellence and their creativity got us somewhere. What they need help with is, okay, now how do I scale this successfully, profitably?
Yeah.
And again, that's where I find a lot of folks kind of struggling. I'm surprised, I think, and I shouldn't be. Someone asked me, big company, little company. And I said, well, I think my large company training, and they spend a lot of money in two companies I with, in training, affords me to bring that information into smaller companies. But if you drop your ego and if you think locally, then I don't care what the size of the business is.
Yeah. Well said, John. Well said. We'll leave your contact details in the show notes for people who want to contact you. I think it's an amazing, you've got a niche going, John, and I would suggest that there's not many people in industry that have your background, that have decided to, take the safety angle along with everything else that you do. So it's a credit to you. My hat's off to you on that. And it's been brilliant to have you on the show. So thank you so much.
Listen, I appreciate it. I think what you do is extremely valuable. And again, my motivation way back then was I never want to be part of an organization that has to tell somebody that their child is not here anymore.
Thanks very much, John.
Have a great day.